Welcome to Spark to Shine, where ideas meet purpose. Today's message was crafted with AI tools, but guided by human insight. Let's grow together.
Leadership isn't forged in the spotlight. It doesn't arrive wrapped in applause or whispered in birthright. It emerges quietly in the pause between questions and the weight of responsibility no one sees. We imagine leaders as those who rise above, yet true leadership is not ascension, it is immersion. It is the soul's response to a deeper calling, woven through the silent lessons of failure, the still ache of waiting, and the sacred rhythm of service. Life, in its infinite wisdom, doesn't shout instructions. It composes, note by note, a symphony of moments, each one shaping us in unseen ways. The doubt, the delay, the detour, they are not interruptions. They are choreography. When we stop resisting the unknown and start listening to its quiet instruction, we realize leadership is not a crown to wear, but a practice to return to, again and again. You were never meant to lead by being more, only by becoming more deeply yourself. You see, we've been conditioned, quietly, almost imperceptibly, to believe that leadership announces itself, that it walks into a room and demands attention, that it's a trait, maybe even a birthright, reserved for the loudest, the boldest, the most charismatic. But that illusion, while seductive, is deeply incomplete, because real leadership doesn't begin on a stage, it begins in silence. It starts in those small, unglamorous moments, when no one's watching and there's no recognition to be gained. It begins in the in-between, in the spaces where uncertainty lives and clarity hasn't yet arrived. It starts in the questions we're often too afraid to ask ourselves. Who am I when the outcome isn't guaranteed? Who do I become when no one applauds the effort? This silence isn't empty. It's formative. It's where the foundations are laid, not with cement and certainty, but with presence and patience. It's not about pretending to have the answers. It's not about pretending to have the answers. It's about being still long enough to let the right questions rise to the surface. And in that stillness, leadership takes root, not as something we declare, but something we earn through self-awareness, humility, and consistency. Some of the strongest leaders I've known didn't speak the loudest. They listened the longest. They weren't the first to run toward the spotlight. They were the last to abandon the difficult work behind the scenes. They showed up before others knew they needed to, not because it was strategic, but because it was right. We mistake volume for vision. But vision, real vision, is often quiet. It doesn't shout, follow me. It whispers, I'll go first. And that choice to step forward into the unknown, to move toward responsibility rather than away from it, is not born of talent. It's born of intention, of practice, of becoming intimately familiar with discomfort and letting it shape you into someone others can trust. We've all seen what happens when leadership is approached as a performance. It becomes brittle, reactive, disconnected. It may succeed for a moment, but it can't sustain the weight of real responsibility because it was built on image, not character. But when leadership begins in silence, when it comes from a place of grounded presence, it doesn't just inspire, it endures. The truth is, you can't fake the work that happens in the quiet. You can't shortcut the nights of self-doubt, the conversations that forced you to confront your own limitations, the choices that cost you comfort in favor of integrity. Those moments don't show up on resumes, but they live in the posture of every true leader. They live in how you hold space for others, and how you listen before you act, and how you remain steady when the room is falling apart. We don't talk enough about that part, the invisible part, because it doesn't look like leadership, but it is. It's the soil. It's the quiet, patient waiting before the harvest. It's where trust is planted long before results ever bloom. And the irony is, the more grounded a leader is in that silent, unseen work, the more powerfully their presence is felt, without having to be loud, without needing to be right, without demanding to be followed. I believe we each carry within us the capacity to lead. But that capacity isn't unlocked by chance or charm. It's cultivated slowly, over time, by choosing to step into the quiet when it's easier to turn away, by choosing reflection over reaction, service over self-interest, stillness over spectacle. Leadership is not found in the moment you're given authority. It's revealed in the way you respond when you have none. It's born when you hold yourself to a standard that no one else sees. When you do the work that won't earn you praise, but that will earn you praise, but that will earn you trust. And so, if you're waiting for someone to call you a leader before you become one, you'll wait forever. Because no one gets to give you that title. Not really. It's something you choose to live into, moment by moment, in the quiet spaces where character is shaped and purpose is forged. The world doesn't need more leaders with louder voices. It needs more people brave enough to lead in silence. We tend to think of adversity as something to get through, something to survive, something to endure until the better moment finally comes. But what if adversity isn't the detour? What if it's the path? What if the very challenges we try so hard to avoid are the ones quietly forming us into the kind of people who can be trusted to lead? Every single person in this room has experienced moments of struggle of struggle. Maybe it was personal. Maybe it was professional. Maybe you were overlooked, misunderstood, underestimated. Maybe you felt completely alone in your effort. And in those moments, it's tempting to believe that something has gone wrong, that you've taken a wrong turn or missed some crucial step. But I want to offer another possibility. That adversity isn't a sign of failure. It's a sign of becoming. It's the fire that tempers us, the weight that strengthens us, the silence that sharpens our inner voice. It's not there to punish us. It's there to prepare us. Because here's the truth. Leadership without adversity is just theory. It might look good on paper, but it lacks the depth that only lived experience can bring. You can read about resilience, or you can be shaped by it. You can talk about empathy, or you can earn it by being broken open by your own pain. You can promote the idea of perseverance, or you can embody it by standing back up when everything inside you wants to stay down. The leaders we remember, the ones we trust, the ones we follow, are rarely those who had it easy. They're the ones who were willing to face the hard things. The ones who stayed when it would have been easier to leave. The ones who learned not to rush past their pain, but to learn from it. They didn't just survive adversity, they let it teach them. Think about that for a second. The hardest moments of your life may have been the very moments that were shaping your leadership without you even realizing it. That failure you still wince at, maybe that was the moment you learned humility. Humility. That betrayal you never saw coming, maybe that taught you discernment. That season of uncertainty where nothing made sense, maybe that was where you learned to trust your inner compass. There's no shortcut through this, no hack, no polished brand of leadership that lets you bypass the mess. And honestly, we don't need more polished. We need more real. We need leaders who are willing to stand in the middle of difficulty, not because they enjoy it, but because they understand it's necessary. Because they understand that pain, when met with reflection, turns into wisdom. And wisdom is the soil in which real leadership grows. It's easy to admire resilience in others, but building it in ourselves is uncomfortable. Because to build it, you have to be stretched. You have to fail. To fail. You have to keep going when there's no guarantee that it'll work out. And that's terrifying. But it's also transformational. And here's something you need to hear. Just because something is hard doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. In fact, if it's hard, there's a good chance you're right where you're supposed to be. Because growth is never tidy. Transformation isn't elegant. It's gritty. It's uncertain. It's full of moments that make you question everything. But if you stay with it, if you let adversity do its work, it will shape you into the kind of person who doesn't just talk about leadership, but embodies it. You'll stop trying to be impressive and start trying to be of service. You'll stop chasing approval and start cultivating trust. Cultivating trust. You'll stop hiding your scars and start letting them be the proof that you've been through something real and came out the other side more honest, more grounded, more whole. People don't follow perfection. They follow depth. They follow someone who's been through the fire and stayed soft. Someone who's learned to carry pain without letting it become armor. That kind of leadership doesn't come from talent. It comes from the willingness to be changed by what you've lived through. So the next time life knocks you down, pause before you label it as a failure. Look again. As a failure. Look again. Ask yourself, what is this shaping in me? What strength is being built here that I can't yet see? Because adversity, when we let it, becomes the invitation to step into a deeper kind of leadership, one that isn't flashy, but faithful, one that doesn't rise quickly, but roots deeply. And in the end, the struggle won't be what disqualifies you. It'll be the very thing that prepares you to lead with wisdom, with humility, and with heart. Adversity doesn't break leaders, it builds them. We live in a world obsessed with outcomes, with titles, with destinations, with the highlight reel. We want to know where someone ended up, what position they landed, what recognition they received, so we can try to reverse engineer the path. But leadership doesn't live at the destination. Live at the destination. It lives in the way we walk the road to get there. It's not about where you're going. It's about how you choose to move forward, step by step, even when no one is clapping, even when no one is watching. The irony is, the further you travel on this path of becoming a leader, the more you realize that the titles don't matter as much as we think they do. The real weight of leadership is in the unseen, in the way you carry yourself when you're tired, and the easy way out is available. In the way you treat people when there's nothing to gain from being kind. In the way you hold your integrity in moments where compromise would be faster and easier. You don't become a leader the moment someone gives you a position. You become a leader in the invisible spaces long before anyone else calls you one. Leadership is shaped by what we do when no one's looking. That's the difference. It's not defined by the spotlight. It's defined by the shadow work, the internal discipline, the character you build in silence. We often confuse leadership with control, with having power, having answers, having the final say. But real leadership is far less about control and far more about responsibility. It's about showing up even when you're unsure. It's about being accountable, not just for results, but for how you make people feel along the way. It's about asking yourself, can I be trusted in the small things? Can I be consistent when no one is tracking my performance? And it's in those small things, the tiny decisions, the daily attitudes, the repeated choices, that leadership is quietly built. We want it to be a moment, something clear and dramatic. But in reality, leadership is more like a rhythm, a way of showing up that becomes second nature, not because you're performing for others, but because it's aligned with who you are becoming. This journey isn't glamorous. It's often lonely. The most important decisions rarely feel significant when you make them. Saying no to cutting corners, owning your mistakes, choosing to tell the truth even when it's uncomfortable, those aren't dramatic moments, but they are defining ones. Because they determine what kind of leader you're becoming. They shape the tone of your leadership, the texture of your presence. And here's the beautiful thing. When you begin to lead from that place, when you let the journey shape your integrity, you become the kind of person people trust instinctively. They may not be able to articulate why, but they feel it. They feel safe with you. They feel seen. And that kind of leadership, the kind that creates space for others to bring their full selves, is rare. And it's powerful. I've seen people with high titles and low impact, and I've seen people with no formal title lead entire rooms simply by the way they carried themselves. The difference wasn't talent. It wasn't charisma. It was depth, consistency, integrity. And those aren't things you suddenly gain when you're promoted. Those are things you cultivate on the journey, through the decisions you make when no one is watching. So if you're in a season where you feel unseen, where you're doing the work, showing up, making the right choices, and wondering if it even matters, I want to tell you, it matters more than you know, because the journey is shaping you. And the way you move through this season will echo in the seasons to come. It's not about arriving at some mountaintop moment where everything comes clear and perfect. It's about becoming the kind of person who is trustworthy with influence, because you've earned that trust long before anyone gave you authority. That's real leadership. That's what lasts. The journey will always matter more than the role, because when the title is gone, when the applause fades, when the achievements are no longer fresh, what will remain is who you became along the way. The role may open the door, but it's the journey that makes you worthy to walk through it. One of the most powerful realizations we can have as human beings, let alone as leaders, is that we are not separate. We are not isolated islands, building empires of independence. We are deeply, inescapably connected. Every interaction we have ripples outward, outward. Every choice we make, every word we speak, every silence we hold, it all echoes into someone else's world. Leadership, when it is real, is not about standing above. It's about standing among. The myth of the lone heroic leader is a tempting one. It flatters the ego. It tells us that if we just work hard enough, shine bright enough, no more than everyone else, we'll rise above the rest and lead from the top. But the reality, the leaders who actually change things, the ones who inspire, who shape culture, who leave legacies, they don't see themselves as above anyone. They see themselves as part of something larger than themselves, something relational, something sacred. We forget this because leadership is often portrayed as a solo act. The visionary, the CEO, the founder, the person on stage. But leadership is not a spotlight, it's a mirror. It reflects the people around us, the culture we build together, the trust we foster. Leadership is shared space. Peace. It's relational energy. It's not a look at me. It's a come with me. And when we begin to lead from that place, when we see the people around us not as resources to manage, but as human beings to honor, everything changes. The dynamic shifts. Trust grows. Engagement deepens. People stop following because they have to and start following because they want to, because they feel seen, because they feel safe. That's the heartbeat of true leadership, the ability to hold space for others, to see them fully, to serve not for your own elevation, but for their flourishing. And here's the paradox. When you lead that way, when you make it about others, not yourself, you become the kind of leader people actually want to follow. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking leadership is about being right, about having the answers, But when we lead from connectedness, we realize that it's not about having all the answers. It's about asking the right questions. It's about listening. It's about being present enough to notice what someone's not saying and caring enough to ask why. It's about seeing the unseen and valuing the overlooked. Some of the most important things a leader can offer, empathy, encouragement, stability, don't come from a place of dominance. They come from a place of shared humanity. And that kind of leadership doesn't require a title. It doesn't require a corner office or a fancy credential. It requires awareness. It requires heart. I've seen people completely transform environments simply by how they show up in a room, not by force, not by charisma, but by how they treat others, by the respect they offer. The respect they offer. By the trust they build slowly, consistently, in the day-to-day moments. That's the invisible glue of real leadership. And it only works when we understand we're all in this together. When we lead from a place of connection, we're not just building teams, we're building trust. We're not just delivering results, we're delivering meaning. And meaning isn't a KPI. It's felt, it's lived, it's remembered. And if you're someone who's afraid that being compassionate might make you seem weak, let me say this as clearly as I can. Empathy is not weakness. Vulnerability is not weakness. They're strengths, precisely because they're rare, because they take courage, because they mean choosing people over performance, values over validation. The greatest leaders are not the ones with the most authority. They're the ones who understand their responsibility. The responsibility to lift others, to protect the vulnerable, to build something bigger than themselves. They lead with humility, not hierarchy. Hierarchy. And that humility doesn't diminish them, it deepens them. So if you're waiting until you have a certain title before you start leading with connection, don't. Start now. Start wherever you are. You don't need permission to care. You don't need a position to serve. Leadership isn't a rank. It's a choice you make in every conversation, every decision, every interaction. We rise by lifting others, not as a tactic, but as a truth. Not because it's strategic, but because it's human. The most powerful leaders don't lead from above, they lead from beside. We live in an age where we've become obsessed with looking like we know what we're doing. We perfect our profiles, polish our presentations, practice the right tone, the right stance, the right words. We show up with answers, even when we don't feel them, because somewhere along the way we were taught that leadership means certainty, clarity, control. That to lead is to be right. Always. But the truth is, Presence is far more powerful than perfection. Think about the people who've made a lasting impact on your life, the ones you truly trusted. Were they always right? Always polished? Probably not. But I'll bet they were present. I'll bet they made you feel like you mattered. I'll bet they listened more than they spoke, and when they did speak, it came from a place of thoughtfulness, not performance. They weren't there to impress you, they were there with you. That's presence. Leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about having the courage to stay in the room when the answers aren't clear, to remain calm when things get loud, to say, I don't know, but I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. That's the kind of leadership people follow. Not the loudest in the room, but the one most anchored when the room begins to shake. We've confused perfection with credibility, but perfection builds distance. It creates a gap between the leader and the people they're leading. It says, I'm untouchable, I'm always right, I don't need help. And that's not inspiring. That's intimidating. That's exhausting. And it's not real. People don't follow you because you're flawless. They follow you because you're real. Because you show up even when it's messy. Because you care enough to listen, to learn, to admit when you're wrong. And when you lead from presence rather than performance, you give others permission to do the same. You create a space where people can breathe. And that kind of space, that's where trust grows. There's a quiet strength in someone who can sit with discomfort without trying to fix it right away. In someone who can listen to another's fear or frustration without rushing in to defend or dismiss. That kind of leader doesn't need to be perfect. They need to be present, attuned, grounded. Because present says, I see you, I hear you, you're not alone. And for many people, that's more powerful than any solution. I've sat in rooms where someone had all the right answers and left no impact. And I've sat in rooms where someone said very little, but their presence changed everything. Why? Because leadership isn't just what you say, it's what people feel when they're around you. And people can feel the difference between performance and presence. This doesn't mean we abandon excellence. It doesn't mean we don't prepare, or that we never strive to grow. We never strive to grow. But it does mean we stop trying to lead from a place of fear. Fear of being wrong, of looking weak, of not knowing enough. Because fear leads to performance. Presence comes from trust, and that trust starts within. When we're grounded in who we are, when we're clear on our values, when we've done the work in silence, when we've let adversity shape us, and when we recognize we are part of something greater, then we don't need to perform. We just need to show up fully, authentically, and consistently. And that kind of leadership is magnetic because it's rare, because it's real, because it offers something deeper than certainty. It offers connection, and connection is what people are longing for, not just in their work, but in their lives. So if you ever feel like you're not enough because you don't have it all figured out, pause, breathe. Remember, you don't need to have all the answers to lead well. You need to be with people. You need to show up, listen, care, and be courageous enough to stand in uncertainty with others without needing to control it. People don't remember what you got right. They remember how you made them feel when things were falling apart. They remember whether you stayed, whether you listened, whether you showed up. Presence leaves a mark that perfection never will. There's this quiet pressure we all carry, the idea that we're somehow behind. That leadership is a destination we're late to. That everyone else got the map, and we're just stumbling in the dark, trying to catch up. But what if I told you that you're not behind at all? That everything you've lived, every detour, every failure, every small victory and silent decision has been part of the unfolding. That leadership isn't something you finally arrive at. It's something you return to again and again as you become more deeply yourself. We treat growth like it's a linear ladder. Step 1, step 2, step 3, then you're a leader. But growth doesn't work that way. It's cyclical. It spirals. It revisits. And the truth is, you don't become a leader once. You keep becoming over and over through each moment that calls you to rise when it would be easier to shrink. Some days that becoming looks bold. It looks like standing up, speaking out, taking charge. Other days it looks like stepping back, creating space, choosing to listen instead of lead. Both count. Both are part of it. Because leadership is not a fixed identity. It's a relationship between who you are and who the world needs you to be. And here's the thing, you're already in it, right now. Whether you feel ready or not, whether you've been given the title or not, whether anyone has recognized you or not, you're already becoming the kind of person people look to when things are unclear. The kind of person others turn to not because you're perfect, but because you're consistent, grounded human. We have this false image of what leadership should look like. It's clean, it's composed, it's confident. But real leadership often feels like doubt. It feels like second guessing yourself while still choosing to show up. It feels like carrying the weight of decisions no one else sees. It feels like learning and over that leadership is not about knowing more. It's about becoming more whole. It's about becoming more whole. And wholeness doesn't come from skipping the hard parts. It comes from facing them, from letting them teach you, from realizing that the parts of your story you once thought disqualified you, failures, your wounds, your insecurities, are the very things that make your leadership real, relatable, and not human. The people we trust most are the ones who are honest about their becoming. They don't lead with a polished script. They lead with presence, with empathy, with a deep knowing that no one ever really arrives. They just keep showing up, learning, growing, evolving. That's what leadership is. It's not a trait, it's a posture, a daily decision, a willingness to say, I may not have it all figured out, but I will stay present. I will take responsibility, I will serve, I will grow. And the beauty of it is this. You don't have to wait to be more of something, more experienced, more eloquent, more confident, to start leading from that place. You just have to be willing to let who you are today meet what's being asked of you. That's enough. Tomorrow, you'll be someone slightly different because life will continue shaping you. And you'll meet that version too with openness and courage. So maybe leadership isn't about climbing to the top. Maybe it's about returning over and over and over to the center, to what you value, to what you believe in, to the people who trust you not because you're the smartest in the room, but because you're the most present, the most real. And when you begin to trust that process, when you begin to see yourself not as someone who might become a leader someday, but as someone who is already becoming, you begin to lead from a place of peace, not pressure, from calling, not comparison. You don't need to become someone else to lead. You just need to become more fully, more courageously, more honestly yourself. Leadership isn't a role you earn, it's a reflection of who you choose to become